It all started when my parents decided to pack up and leave. They'd been distant for years, but I never imagined they would just up and leave with no warning. I was the youngest of three, and while my siblings had already moved out and created lives for themselves, I was still at home. I had always been the quiet, overlooked one, so when my parents told me they were leaving, it didn't surprise me. I didn't know where they were going or why. They said it was none of my business, and they handed me the keys to an old storage unit. That was it. No explanation, no closure. My sister, Katie, smirked as they left. "Good luck, loser." She laughed, before turning away with a dismissive wave. I couldn't blame her. Katie had always been the favorite, the one who could do no wrong. Growing up, she always got the better stuff, the attention, and the approval. Me? I was the odd one out, the one who didn't fit. My parents probably didn't even care if I was upset. They were never emotionally invested in me, so the departure didn't feel like a loss. When I finally got to the storage unit, I half expected it to be full of old junk. It was dingy, dark, and smelly, just like I imagined. A complete mess, like a chaotic mix of forgotten things. Old furniture, stacks of cardboard boxes, broken appliances, and random knickknacks filled the space. At first glance, it looked like nothing more than trash. I thought about just leaving it all behind. Maybe I could sell what I could, scrap the rest, and move on. But something told me to look a little closer. And as I dug deeper into the mess, I found it. It was buried under a pile of shredded paper and old magazines, an old, dusty hard drive. I picked it up, not really expecting much. It was a relic from another time. At first, I figured it was useless, something from the 90s or early 2000s. But for some reason, I decided to plug it into my computer. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for, maybe a glimpse into my parents' past, or just curiosity. What I found shocked me. The hard drive wasn't filled with old documents or files from when they were younger. Instead, it contained a single folder titled Bitcoin. I clicked on it without thinking, and to my astonishment, I found a digital wallet containing 1,300 Bitcoins. At that moment, I froze. I couldn't believe my eyes. I knew what Bitcoin was, who didn't? But I never imagined my parents would have so many. The value was mind-blowing, and at that moment, I realized that this wasn't just some relic of the past, it was worth millions. I felt a mix of emotions, shock, excitement, and maybe even a little bit of vengeance. My parents had left me with a trash heap, but it turns out they had left me something far more valuable than anything they ever gave me before. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I knew I had to be careful. No one could know. But the temptation was too great. I moved the Bitcoin into a secure wallet and waited. I didn't tell anyone, not even my siblings. 3 days later, I received a call from my sister. She sounded frantic. "Where are you?" she demanded. "Mom and Dad are trying to contact you, and they need help." I didn't say anything at first, just listening to her desperation. But then I let out a quiet laugh. "Funny. They never needed help from me before," I replied. Katie didn't get it. She was too consumed by the drama of our parents' sudden departure. But then, she dropped the bomb. "Mom and Dad need their Bitcoins. They're in debt. They've lost everything, and they need you to help them." My heart skipped a beat. I knew then that they didn't even realize what they had left behind. I wasn't about to help them, not after everything they'd put me through. I didn't say anything for a moment, just letting the silence stretch on. I could hear the desperation in her voice. "Please, we need to get this sorted out. You're the only one who can help." I almost felt sorry for her, but then I remembered her mocking words from days ago. I had a choice now, a chance to level the playing field. "I'm not helping you, Katie. I'm fine. More than fine, actually. But it's too bad you can't say the same about Mom and Dad." The call ended abruptly, and I didn't hear from her for a while. A few days passed, and my parents finally tracked me down. Their voices were trembling, filled with panic. They demanded to know if I had found anything in the storage unit. I found something, I replied, letting the silence linger in the air. And it's more than you ever gave me. There was a long pause, and then the desperation in their voices became apparent. They were begging, pleading for me to help them. Please, we need it back. We'll do anything. But I just laughed. You should have thought of that before you left me with trash. It was my turn to have the upper hand. My life had changed in a moment, and now I wasn't the one begging anymore. They were. The days that followed were strange. It was almost like they were trying to make amends, but it was too late. My parents called incessantly, sending frantic text messages and even leaving desperate voicemails. They didn't seem to understand that this wasn't about money, it was about everything they'd done to me over the years. At first, I thought about keeping the bitcoins, maybe cashing them out and starting a new life somewhere far away. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't need their money. What I needed was the power to stand up for myself, something I'd never had before. It was as though I could finally breathe, as if the weight of years of neglect had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't owe them anything. I had been the one left behind, forgotten like a piece of furniture in a storage unit. But now, I was in control. And as much as I wanted to, I wasn't going to just take the money and disappear. No, I was going to make them squirm. I decided to have a little fun with this. I didn't immediately respond to their calls or messages. Instead, I let them sweat, knowing they were desperate. It was a game now, and I was in charge. They had ignored me for years, pretending I didn't matter. Now, I was the one holding all the cards. Katie, as expected, was the first to reach out again. She was angry this time, demanding to know what I was doing with the bitcoins. She had no idea what I had found, and I was loving every second of it. I could hear the panic in her voice. You have no idea what you're doing, do you? She snapped. Mom and Dad are freaking out. You're being selfish. I was calm, maybe even a little amused. Selfish? I'm just taking care of what was left to me. And don't worry, Katie, I'm sure they'll figure something out. After all, they always seem to find a way to fix their problems, at least, when it's convenient for them. She didn't respond right away, and I could almost hear her pacing on the other end of the phone. But then, she tried to guilt-trip me, playing the family card. This isn't just about money. This is about them needing help, about them needing you now more than ever. They messed up, okay? But they're asking for forgiveness. Please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I smiled, feeling the power surge through me. You don't get it, do you, Katie? This is about respect. It's about time they realized how they treated me. You know, maybe they should have thought about that before they handed me a storage unit full of junk. But you're right, I'm not making it harder. I'm just letting them see what it's like to finally lose. There was a long pause before she muttered, "You're a jerk." But it wasn't angry anymore, it was more of a sad resignation. I knew then that she wasn't the one I was really fighting against. It was Mom and Dad. The next day, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mother's voice, shaky and filled with regret. Please, we made a mistake. We don't know what we were thinking. You have to understand, we were trying to protect you from the mess we created. But this is bigger than we thought. We need the Bitcoin. We'll give you anything, whatever you want. I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth. Anything? I repeated. You think I'm some kind of pawn you can just move around? You think this is just about money? You were never there when I needed you. Now you want to act like the concerned parents you never were? She started crying, and I could hear her voice crack. Please, don't do this. We're sorry. We just didn't know how to help. We thought it would be better to leave, but now we see what we've done. You're right. We've always treated you like you didn't matter. But that's not how we feel. Please, let us fix this. My heart wavered for a second. The old me, the me that had craved their approval, almost wanted to cave. But then I remembered all the years I had spent in their shadows, all the times I had been dismissed or forgotten. I wasn't their safety net anymore. I was done being their afterthought. I don't think you can fix this, Mom, I said softly. You can't just erase all the years you ignored me, all the ways you made me feel small. And you can't buy my forgiveness with money. It's too late for that. Her sobs grew louder, but I stood firm. I wasn't about to give in. I wasn't going to be manipulated anymore. This wasn't about charity or pity, it was about standing up for myself for once in my life. Over the next few weeks, things got increasingly desperate. My parents tried everything. They offered me money, gifts, and promises of trips and vacations. They even said they'd sell their house if I would just return the Bitcoin. But I never answered their calls. I didn't need them anymore. Not in the way they thought. I wasn't interested in their money or their hollow apologies. I had something far more valuable, my freedom. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I was truly in control. It wasn't long before things started to escalate. My parents and Katie were relentless, but the more they pressured me, the more determined I became. I was no longer that quiet, overlooked sibling. I had power now, and I wasn't afraid to use it. One afternoon, I got an unexpected message. It was from Katie, and this time, it wasn't the usual frantic call or angry text. It was a simple message, "I'm sorry." At first, I didn't know what to make of it. Katie had always been the one who thought she had everything figured out. Apologizing? It didn't seem like her. But the longer I stared at the screen, the more I understood what it really meant. She was breaking. She was losing control, just like our parents had. I responded after a while, keeping it short. "Sorry for what?" Her reply came quickly. "I know what I said before. I know I was wrong. But please, I'm begging you, don't let this tear our family apart. I can't lose you too." That was it. That's when I realized she wasn't just apologizing for the things she'd said, she was acknowledging the fact that everything we'd known had changed. My parents had lost their grip, and now she was grasping at straws. But I wasn't sure what to say. A part of me wanted to tell her that I was done, that I didn't owe them anything. But another part of me, the one that still wanted some semblance of connection, hesitated. I thought about our childhood, the times when we'd laughed together, before everything got so complicated. I took a breath and decided to be honest, something I hadn't done in years. "Katie, I'm not trying to destroy anyone. But I can't forget what they've done. They've treated me like nothing for my whole life. Now they think they can come back and demand something from me? I'm not their safety net anymore. I'm not anyone's." She didn't reply right away, but a few hours later, I received a call from her. Her voice was different, quieter, like she wasn't sure what to say. "I understand," she said softly. "I really do. I'm sorry for how everything's turned out." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her everything was fine, but I couldn't lie. "It's too late for all of that. You've always been the favorite, Katie. You've always gotten what you wanted. I've been invisible, and now when it's convenient for you, you want me to help fix everything. It doesn't work like that." The call ended with an awkward silence. I wasn't sure if we'd ever truly talk again. But something inside me felt like it was done, like that part of my life was over. The next few weeks passed in a blur. My parents continued to contact me, sending more desperate messages. They even tried to involve distant relatives, asking them to convince me to return the Bitcoins. But I didn't care. I was still unmoved, and each attempt felt like an old wound reopening. Then came the day when I finally made my decision. I transferred the bitcoins to a secure wallet and withdrew a large portion. I didn't cash it all out, that wasn't the point. Instead, I decided to make a statement. I created a separate bank account and deposited a fraction of the funds, enough to change the course of my life. Enough to live comfortably without worrying about bills, rent, or anything that had ever held me back. But I didn't stop there. I took another portion and set up a fund. It wasn't for me, it was for people who had been overlooked, dismissed, or abandoned by their families, just like I had been. The idea was simple: give back to those who needed it the most, to those who were never given a chance. It felt like redemption, not just for me, but for anyone who had been in my position. I knew I couldn't change the past, but I could change the future. And for once, I felt like I was doing something that mattered. I didn't respond to my parents' messages anymore. The calls stopped after a while, and I heard nothing from them for a few weeks. It was almost as if they had finally accepted that I wasn't going to play their game. But one day, just as I was starting to think they had given up, I received a letter in the mail. It was from my mother. Opening it carefully, I read her words: "I don't know what you're going through, but I know we hurt you. We didn't see it then, but I hope you can understand now. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if we deserve it. But I'm sorry. For everything." I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter, my hands trembling. The words were hollow to me now. I realized that I didn't need their apology. I didn't need them to acknowledge what they had done. I had moved on. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free from the expectations, the guilt, the constant weight of never being enough. I had everything I needed now, not from them, but from the choices I had made. And for once, I was finally in control of my own future. Weeks passed, and I started to settle into my new life. I kept my daily routine simple. I didn't go crazy with the money. I didn't buy a flashy car or a mansion. I just paid off my debts, moved into a modest apartment, and began to focus on the things that truly mattered to me: peace, stability, and creating something of my own. The money from the Bitcoin wasn't the key to my happiness, it was the key to freedom. It gave me the chance to finally live for myself without constantly worrying about the weight of the past. I could breathe again. But it wasn't just the financial security that had changed my life, it was everything I had learned. I no longer looked at the world through the lens of the family I had grown up with. Their approval didn't matter. Their expectations no longer held any sway over me. I was carving out a life that was mine. One evening, as I sat in my small but cozy living room, sipping a cup of tea and scrolling through old photos on my phone, I received a message. It was from Katie again. She had reached out occasionally, but it was always indirect, through mutual friends or random text messages. This one, however, was different. She was asking to meet. I wasn't sure how I felt about that. In the months since everything had unfolded, I hadn't seen her or heard from her in person. But curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed to meet at a quiet cafe downtown. When I saw her, she looked different. Tired, maybe even a little broken. Her usual confidence was gone. She wasn't the smug, entitled sister I used to know. She was just human. We sat down in silence for a few moments, the weight of the past between us. I could feel the tension in the air, the words unsaid hanging over us like a cloud. Finally, Katie spoke. "I don't know what to say, except that I'm sorry. Not just for what happened with Mom and Dad, but for everything. For how I treated you, for being part of the problem, and for never really seeing you. I didn't know what to make of it." Her apology felt genuine, but part of me wasn't sure if it was too late for all of this. Too late to fix what had been broken for so long. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, keeping my voice calm but firm. "But I'm not sure things can go back to how they were. We've both changed, Katie. You can't just undo years of what happened with a couple of words." She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and sadness. I know. And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I just wanted you to know that I've changed. I see things differently now. I see you differently. It wasn't an instant connection or some magical moment where everything was suddenly perfect. But there was a shift, something small but significant. For the first time, I could see that Katie wasn't the person she used to be. Maybe she had learned something from all this, too. We talked for a while longer, about nothing in particular. About life, about where we were now, about how the family had been affected by everything. It wasn't a deep conversation, but it was the beginning of something. Maybe not a full reconciliation, but a step toward healing. I didn't know if we would ever be close again, but I wasn't angry anymore. As we parted ways, Katie gave me a small, uncertain smile. I'm really proud of you, she said quietly. You've always been stronger than I gave you credit for. I didn't reply right away. But as I watched her walk away, something inside me shifted again. The weight I'd been carrying seemed just a little lighter. When I got home that night, I sat down in front of my computer, reflecting on everything that had happened. The Bitcoin, the power it gave me, the distance it created between me and my parents, it had all led me here. To a place of quiet strength. I opened up my secure wallet, the one that had once held all those Bitcoins, and I transferred the remaining balance. I didn't need it anymore. The money wasn't going to bring me happiness or fulfillment. It was just a tool, a means to an end. But now, I could use it to give back. I created a few donations to different causes, mental health, child welfare, organizations that helped people rebuild their lives after abuse or neglect. The things I had gone through, the things I'd overcome, weren't unique to me. There were so many people out there struggling, people who didn't have a way out. And maybe, just maybe, I could make a difference for them. It was the only way I knew how to turn something dark into something good. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. I still had moments of doubt, still thought about the past, and I knew there would always be scars. But for the first time in a long time, I was okay. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. And that was enough. Months went by, and life started to feel normal. Not perfect, but steady. I had made peace with the decisions I had made, the path I had chosen. The Bitcoins, the family drama, all of it felt like it had happened in another life, and in some ways, it had. I was a different person now, someone who had reclaimed control over their own future. I spent more time focusing on myself. I picked up old hobbies I had forgotten about, like painting and reading. I started exploring new interests too, things I had always wanted to try but never had the chance to. I went on long walks through the city, sometimes with a coffee in hand, sometimes just lost in my thoughts. I felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't known before. But despite all the peace I had gained, there were still moments when the weight of the past would creep back in. Like when I saw a family together at a restaurant, or when I heard someone mention a childhood memory I didn't have. I realized that while I had moved forward, some things would never fully go away. Then one day, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" I said cautiously. "Hey, it's Katie," came the voice on the other end. "I know you probably didn't expect to hear from me again, but I wanted to say something." I sat back in my chair, unsure of what to expect. Part of me had moved past it, but another part of me was curious. "What is it?" I asked. "I know things are different now," she said, her voice softer than I remembered. "And I know I messed up. But I've been thinking a lot about what you said, how you've changed, how you're living your life for yourself now. And I just wanted you to know that I'm proud of you." There was a silence on the other end. I didn't know how to respond at first. I hadn't expected an apology from her, but this felt different. She wasn't just apologizing. She was acknowledging my strength in a way that felt real. I'm proud of you too, Katie, I said, surprised by the words coming out of my mouth. I know it's been complicated, but I think we both needed this distance to figure things out. To figure ourselves out. She let out a soft breath, like she had been holding something back for a long time. Yeah. I guess I never really understood what you were going through. Not until I saw you making a life for yourself, and it made me realize just how much I took for granted. I never took the time to really see you. I smiled a little. It's okay. I get it. I spent so long trying to get their approval, trying to get anyone's approval. But the only person I needed approval from was myself. There was another long pause, and I could hear the faint sound of traffic in the background. I think I'm ready to start making things right. I know it won't be easy, but I want to try. I don't expect us to go back to how things were, but maybe we can build something new. I didn't have an immediate answer. Part of me was still protective of the distance I had created. But the other part of me, the one that was starting to let go of all the anger and resentment, felt a flicker of hope. I don't know what that looks like, Katie, I said honestly. But I'm open to seeing where things can go from here. That's all I can ask for, she replied softly. Thanks. And if you ever need anything, I'm here. No matter what. We said our goodbyes, and I ended the call with a sense of quiet relief. It wasn't a dramatic shift, but it was a start. Katie and I would never be the same, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. We had both grown, in different ways, and maybe, just maybe, there was room for us to meet in the middle. The rest of the day passed by in a blur, and I found myself thinking about the conversation for hours. I was in a new chapter of my life now. I didn't know where it would lead, but I was no longer scared of what the future held. The old version of me might have jumped at the chance to reconcile immediately, to fix things for the sake of family. But the new me, the one who had spent so much time learning to live for herself, realized that I didn't need anyone else's approval. I didn't need their apologies or their validation. What mattered now was the life I was building on my own. That night, as I settled into bed, I reflected on how far I had come. The past was always going to be a part of me, but it didn't define me anymore. I had something more powerful now, self-respect. And that was something no one could ever take from me again. The months that followed were a quiet testament to how much I had changed. I wasn't the same person I used to be, and neither was my family. The distance between us had softened a little, but it was still there, and that was okay. We were learning to live with our own truths, and though the past couldn't be erased, it was no longer controlling us. Katie and I had occasional conversations, but it wasn't as much about the past anymore. It was more about moving forward. We never got as close as we once had, but there was a mutual understanding that hadn't been there before. There was no rush to fix everything at once. We had our own lives now, and that was enough. One day, I received a letter from my parents. This time, it wasn't a desperate plea for help. It wasn't filled with guilt or anger. It was simply an acknowledgement. An apology, not for the past, but for how they had treated me. It wasn't grand or dramatic, just a small letter with a few simple words, *, we see you. We're sorry. *, and honestly, that was enough. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time, I felt like I could let go of the lingering resentment I'd been carrying for so long. The weight that had once felt like it would crush me was finally gone. I didn't need their approval, their money, or their promises anymore. I had built my own life, and I was proud of it. I continued with my work, spending more time on things that mattered to me, projects, friendships, and causes that made me feel like I was contributing to something bigger than myself. I wasn't defined by the money I'd found or the family that had abandoned me. I was defined by what I did with the life I had. One evening, as I sat outside with a glass of wine, watching the sun set over the horizon, I realized just how much I had grown. There was peace in my heart now, something I hadn't known in years. I wasn't looking over my shoulder anymore, worried about what others thought of me. I had created a life I loved. And for the first time, I knew I was enough, just as I was. And maybe that was the greatest lesson of all, that the only validation I ever needed was from myself. The future felt wide open, and I was ready for whatever came next. But for now, in this moment, I was content.